And thank you everyone for being here tonight. We're really excited to get started with the South Dakotans Healing Racism. Continue our conversation about religion and spirituality. Tonight we have our guest speaker, Lawrence Diggs, who will talk about spirituality and communication and the intersection of race and racism in those experiences. So I'll go ahead, Lawrence, if you want to share a little bit about yourself, and then we can start the conversation with some questions.
Okay, so in the interest of time and getting right to our subject, I'll just say that I'm doing lots of things, but basically right now, I'm just trying to get in as much things I can before they turn out the lights. I'm in the last the lap, so I'm trying to do what I think should be done or that I can possibly do, and that has a lot to do with like bringing people together and making opportunities for people to experience life. And as a Buddhist and as a monk, I guess my big deal is to try to relieve suffering. That if I had to say, that's what Buddhism is about, relieving suffering. And many people suffer, and hurt people. And so, to the degree that we can, bring something to somebody, especially those who are marginalized and people forget them or walk away, or, even people with Bell's palsy, people look at them and one day they're okay and they're friendly with everybody. The next day, their face is contorted and nobody wants to talk to them. They can't get a job. They go in to the store and people will turn their face. And that kind of thing. I want to be that person who can hug the person with Bell's palsy, and don't mind, So uh, that said, if you don't mind, I'll turn to our subject. I think that's enough about me. I'm on the internet, so if anybody wants to find out more, it's not hard to find out stuff about me. But this is not about me; it's about our subject, and our subject is about what religions can do uh, for racism, how they cause it sometimes. Um, we have to think a little bit about why religions happen anyway. So someone once said that if there were no God, humans would invent one. Because there's something about the human psyche that we recognize that there must be something else other than us, and there must be something that makes all of this run that is beyond us. There's something we inherently understand. There's so much that we don't understand, and there's something bigger. And there's also that big question of death. Death. We have a hard time dealing with death. We know inevitably that we will die, but the brain doesn't want to deal with that. Doesn't want to go there, because the brain's purpose is to keep us alive and make us procreate. That's the two things it's most involved in doing. Anything that suggests that our survival is threatened, the brain has a basal reaction to it. In the amygdala, it's going to start putting out hormones and making you do things, and it will actually shut down the prefrontal cortex, that part where we're thinking about it. So in the cold state, we can have all kinds of ideas about what we're going to do and how we feel and how the world should be. In a hot state, when we're excited, when our emotions kick in, the amygdala shuts all that down, and we have a hard time having rational thoughts. So the degree to which we can control that, the degree to which we can push down the drive to react and let the amygdala control what we do, is the degree to which we can make better decisions, and the decisions that won't lead us into some place we didn't want to go to. I mean, most of us have experienced something like something happens and we say things or we do things that even at the time somehow we knew it wasn't right, but we just couldn't resist saying that thing or writing that thing in Facebook, or There's something that pushes us. Sometimes we can control it. Often we miss the point, and we can't, because there are things in us that make us do things that we are better off not doing. And we also leave off things that we should be able to do. Sometimes fear makes us abandon our own principles, things that in a cold state we think, well, these are important things. This is what I believe in. This is who I am. But in a hot state of fear, we abandon it. It's like, one of the good examples of that is when they're recruiting these child soldiers. One of the things they do is they give them a stick and they make them beat their parents to death. And a child doesn't know how to handle the fear. And they don't want to do that, but they beat them and tell them, if you don't do it, we're going to kill you. And we did after that, we're going to kill your mother anyway. So you may as well. And the mother ends up begging the child to kill her, hoping to save her child. Because fear will make us do things that we don't want to do and go places. I think that there was a story like in the Bible about Jesus with his disciples in the last day, the night before. And they were all talking about how they were with him and stuff. And he told one of them, hey, before the cock crows thrice, you're going to deny me. Because Jesus understood fear, apparently. And he understood what fear will do to people. There was no question that the guy loved him and was dedicated to him. But then there's the part of us that pushes us into places we don't want to go. And we will swear that we won't go there. But there's part of our psyche that will take us there. So religion often fundamentally is about helping us deal with that part of ourselves. Religion is there to help us deal with death, because there's that real big fear that we don't know what's on the other side, the unknown. The brain doesn't like to deal with the unknown because it doesn't know how to calculate and plan for survival in a paradigm when there is the unknown. So religions typically deal with death. And Buddhism, we could say it's almost a cult of death. I mean, if you want to say it in a certain way, because it's all about life, here, but life and death are part of the same thing for Buddhists. Death is part of life. It is something that is much a part of life as birth, and we focus on that because it's part of, let's say, being able to settle yourself down is the acceptance of death. Part of having a moral code is the acceptance of death. Because if we don't accept death and we keep trying to, we operate on an assumption that if nothing kills me, I will keep living, which on one hand seems like common sense, but it's idiotic because something will kill you. You don't know what it is, and it's only going to be one thing that kills you. But every moment we live, we're living in a sea of things that could, and one of which eventually will, kill us. We breathe in organisms, many of them who will kill us. As we breathe, our DNA is replicating, and sometimes it's making mistakes, and sometimes it corrects the mistake and it's okay, and another time it doesn't, and it's cancer, right? There's something that's going to kill us. So accepting death can change your whole perspective about how serious one takes life. When you take life really serious, one of the things that happens is you start making all of these forts. You start grouping things and organizing so as to stay alive. And for humans, we're social animals. So what we do is we make groups. We start with family because that's what we know. That's the first ones we see. I mean, these are typical. I mean, I can tell you many exceptions to the rules, but I'm just going to be talk about generalities because the specifics will get us off into just a rabbit hole. So we do have this. Um, we start with family, and then from family we have, let's say, not really a tribe, but just the people that our family knows, right? In earlier times, we can call them bands. They're groups of families, and then those groups of families make tribes. Now, up until the tribes, people could kind of manage because basically that's the only people you knew, and you talked to those people all the time, and you had communications with them, and egalitarian things, it wasn't a thing. You're blood of my blood, flesh of my flesh. We're all, I see you every day, and even if I don't like you, I have to deal with you every day. If you get meat one day and I get meat the next day, how that African proverb goes, the best place to store your food is in your neighbor's stomach, because that's, you're all in it together, and you understand that without anybody having to make a speech about it, because it's so clear, it's live. The problem comes when we get bigger and we have nation states. With the nation states, they artificially pull together tribes. And when they artificially pull together tribes, the human mind hasn't figured out a way yet to deal with that number of people. We don't know how to massage the feelings and look in the eyes of people that we might see once in our lives and feel a connection. Now, I'm not making the case that it can't be done. I'm just saying that typically humans have a hard time with that. And when we meet somebody for the first time, um, our autonomic system goes into overdrive, where the palms sweat, our breathing changes, uh, all kinds of things happen. But we're not in a receptive mood yet because it's an unknown. We don't know that person. We don't know how they will react. We haven't seen them before. It's not necessarily that something bad going to happen. We just don't know. And when we don't know, the brain starts making up its own narrative because it doesn't like to not know. It just makes up stuff. It runs a script. Get the heck out of here. Either you're food or you're going to eat it. And if I don't know, I'm going to assume first that you're going to eat me or do something to me. Again, that's where religion comes in. With religions, you start to bind the people together based on common beliefs. You try to make people feel connected, and you give them one common belief so that they can focus on that and feel a connection to each other through that thing that you call God. And typically you will say, this God loves us, probably doesn't like those other guys over the hill too much, but he likes us. That's what people do to create nation states. That's what people do to draw people and hold them together, because that's artificial. We don't have the processing power to deal with all those people. So we do it. We handle that kind of unknown by having something that we can all focus on, a belief system that we can all focus on. And that belief system has to explain things to us. Now it turns the other way. And this is where we start to get into how uh, religion starts to create racism. Once we all believe in that same God, then one of the things that we do is we connect our identity to that God. We start to create an identity that rests on We believe these things. We have the same construct of the universe. And if we have the same construct of the universe, I have a feeling that I have a basis on which to talk to you. Religions do that for people. It does that for nation states. The problem is that even the religions now have a problem, because if you go to very many churches, one of the things you'll notice that happens is that you will have a fundamental belief, and people come together with that. But as the group gets bigger, you start to have like little divisions about, well, I don't know if John really meant that when he said that. He said, and so then you have these splits, and little by little they split. It's interesting. When I did a program on the similarities between Buddhism and Christianity, and what was really interesting is how both of those religions have so many splits, where they had the one founder, and the one founder laid the foundation for the belief system. But soon after that founder dies and they start gathering more and more converts, people start splitting up. Now, part of it may be because they have philosophical differences, but a lot of it comes back to the churches become like nation states. It's not the programming for the human mind. It's hard to do that. It's hard for the human mind to manage all of those relationships. So I just stopped liking you because I don't know you, and you stop liking Frank because you just don't know Frank, and Frank is an unknown. Now, maybe you never had any dealings with him, but it's kind of like, you probably heard people say, see a stranger, see a thief. When Frank is the stranger, when you don't see him often, it's really hard for the amygdala. If it doesn't have a connection, it's always afraid that they will threaten your life. Gets back to accepting death. Now, all of this starts to work out when you have a nation states in this whole idea about racism. Now, we could trace it historically back to Adam and Eve, or whatever your origination story is. But if you look at like how people actualize and deal with racism, it's mostly because we don't know each other. Right? That was the whole point of segregation in the before this was a nation and people were segregating people. The reason they did it was because, look, it's really rich people. They only have a small group, right? No matter what happens, that's their competitive advantage. If they have a small group. So even if they don't like each other and they're competitors, they have a small group and they have a vested interest in staying rich, which means basically other people have less than they do. Okay. So those people set out to keep everybody else divided by little perks they give this one, or, like little things, advantages this one gets, and all kinds of ways that they do that. But the point is they stay divided. Religion has been one of the ways that people divide people. Look at Europe, and how many wars did they have? How many people did they kill? And look, Ireland. We think of it racism as, skin color and stuff, and that's the way we talk about it. I don't think it's about skin color at all. Because you look at the Hutsis and the Tutus, we see them on the street, we don't know that they're not cousins. But for them, they're real different. Real different. You look at the Irish Catholics and the Irish Catholics and the Protestant Catholics. Protestant Irish, that whole thing. If we saw those people on the street, we wouldn't say this is a good guy, or we couldn't tell this one is a Protestant and that one's a Catholic. You can't tell. But they were blowing each other up. They were shooting each other on the street. And for them, that's all the difference. Now, you can go back and talk about the historic thing, but these people live today. They don't really have a beef with each other. No, their grandparents or great grandparents had a beef, but they don't have a beef with each other unless they make it a beef. But it just gets down to people have a hard time dealing with more than about 150 people. And then after that, everybody is acquaintances. And all of the nationalism that brings us to a country makes us into a country. We have to do special things to keep making that work. So even though we have religion, religion has a hard time fixing those problems. But if we didn't have those problems, maybe religion would be less of a thing because we aren't perfect. So religion tries to make us better. All the religions, I think, start out trying to make us better. But then what happens is you have people who are sociopaths often, and also people who are just scared and they want more power. Then they use religion to consolidate their power. Once we once we have our little tribes within the religion, you'll notice that not so many religions have a diverse group of people in them because religions turn to be cultural too. This is what happened in the case of the Rohingya. I think you've heard of them. Um, before there was this. Let's say on the face of it, it looks like it's Buddhists versus um, Muslims. But once you understand this situation, once you start looking into it, and I'm going to put some links in the chat so you can go and look this up on Wikipedia. When you understand that what happened is that there was ethnic divide before. People used religion to push the wedge of the ethnic divide. And I think the same thing happens in modern America, where people have an ethnic kind of thing. Mostly it's really mostly about money, interestingly enough, and class. Um, because, left alone, when we look at what was happening in early America, left alone, the people, just like um, feral dogs, you never see the Chihuahuas all hanging out together and the German Shepherds hanging out together. Dogs just are dogs. And people too, if you don't artificially separate them, they find the people they like and the people they don't, and we do something together and we're all good, you know? But you can engineer them to fear each other. And if they fear each other, they will hate each other and they will treat each other unkind. So it gets back to, why do they fear each other? Because they have a sense that their survival is somehow threatened. And people will introduce all kinds of ways to convince people that their survival is threatened. And then when they feel their survival is threatened, they do unkind things to each other. Now the question is, can religion heal that? I believe it can. I believe religion has all kinds of potential to heal the human condition. Many different religions. Because just like there are Buddhist monks who will lead people to attack the Rohingya, when fundamentally, in Buddhism, there is no me. There is no my religion. There is no my country in Buddhism. That is antithetical. In other words, just the opposite of Buddhism. None of that exists in Buddhism. But when you have an ethnic divide and those people know those monks, and there's some history too about, Muslims invading Buddhist countries and stuff like that. Yeah, there's that country. That's a history. But that's not really, we're not living that history now. But people can bring that up and use it to convince people that they should do things when people really don't want to do that. You have to, and if you look carefully at the events, the military manipulated that whole thing. You know, that first the monks were on the side of the Muslims and demonstrating to protect Muslims, and then the military attacked all of them, and then suddenly this one 969 group, yeah, you'll read about all of that in these Wikipedia articles. They started coming out and leading people into doing things that are very un-Buddhist. And the other Buddhists around the world took him to task about it. You know, they basically said, "This is, you know, what the heck are you doing, man? There's nothing to do." And he went to this conference in Sri Lanka, which has its own history of militant and violent Buddhism. Even there, he was denounced. You know, and so now he's trying to change his story. Who knows? He says he's changed. We'll see. You know, the proof's in the pudding, so we'll see. But he says he's changed. But if a religion like Buddhism can have those kind of rogue people, anybody can. Any religion can. And I don't believe that we should judge other religions based on those rogue people, you know. And this happens whether it's Christianity, Buddhism, Islam, whatever. You're always going to have those rogue elements. You know, people who try to use the religion for their own personal gain. Okay, so I think that's probably more sand on the table than you know, that people can handle. So at this point, I will. I think I've made my point. I hope I've made my point. If you have questions, I will try to attack you. Try to answer the questions.
Thank you so much, Lawrence. I really appreciate just the in-depth scope that you're able to bring to the conversation, and how important it is for us to really delve into you know, the deep origins of how, you know, we end up in a place where we're at right now. And so thank you very much for sharing your thoughts on that. I'll go ahead and open for questions. We definitely have some other questions we can prompt to. So no pressure. If you have a question, just go ahead and unmute yourself. It typically works out. And then if not, you know, we can go ahead and figure that out. But go ahead and unmute yourself if you have a question.
Lawrence, Jen here. You provide such depth of wisdom. I mean, I'm in awe of what you talked about tonight. And how do I pass that on to my children? How do I share that with Jacob? You know, being 7 years old, what steps as a mom would you suggest for me to help guide them so they don't go down the same rabbit hole I have as an adult?
That's a tough one, Jen, but here's what I would say. In Buddhism, we say it's all about the practice. You know, we as human beings, we vocalize and we place great weight on vocalization, and we get great benefits from being able to articulate and turn these sounds we make in our mouth with our mouths into ideas in other people's head. That's a pretty neat trick, you know, and a very complicated one. But what really counts is our practice. It's like if you take Jacob and you say, look, let's bring you to, let's give you experiences that cause you to realize certain things on your own, and then ask him, what did you learn from that? You know, I am in awe at my friends in Japan that start every morning with their kids while at breakfast, asking them, what did you learn yesterday? That is the conversation at the breakfast table. What did you learn yesterday? And nobody can show up at the table and say they didn't learn anything. That's like, what? You wasted a whole darn day and you didn't learn anything? So that's one thing, is to ask him, what did you learn yesterday? And the other thing is, even if kids try to be different, because that's part of like identifying who you are and finding your identity, they look at you, they watch you, they see what you do. And even if they go off and, especially when you reach puberty and everything is rearranging in your brains, but you come back to it, and you'll notice in yourself, and you notice with other people, they think, I'm never going to be like mom, I'm never going to be like dad. And lo and behold, there they are. So it's like the things that you do, you will find that, he can learn from that. But if there's one thing that we don't do with our children that would be beneficial, I would say teach him to breathe. And not just when he's mad and say, take a time out and do 10. No, teach him to breathe all the time. They're never too late to learn. In our sect, the kids start learning, meditation and just breathing about the time they start walking. About 4, I would say maybe after the walk, and some of them, they walk early, but teaching him to breathe and teaching him to pay attention to his breath in some fundamental way. And he will start to realize how that makes him feel. You get addicted to breathing, and if people try to stop you from breathing, you get upset. Most of us do anyway. So I would say the most important thing is, if you can teach him to breathe, teach him to, not as a punishment, but as a recreation. And when he sees you doing it, and when you see other people, is that the thing you do? And then he will become a different person just because he breathes different.
I think that's so important. Like, that's that fundamental connection to ourselves that we have so much, where we're disconnected from even our breath. And I think that's something really powerful. Sheila, I think I saw that you were unmuted if you had a question.
You're
I'm muted. I don't have a question right now. Thank you.
Anyone else, feel free just to unmute and ask your question.
So I have a question for you then, because I'm a roller. My question to you is, was there anything that I said that didn't make any sense at all to you? Or what did any of it make sense? Don't, I won't be offended at all, because, I think about these things all the time. I grew up with them. And so sometimes the way I explain it, it's hard to know, well, what have other people thought about? And I can introduce an idea that's like so foreign that it doesn't have a place in other people's brain. It's not that I'm smarter than you, it's I just think about different things.
Definitely. And I don't know, I think we've got Travis with his hand raised. I think he's got a question or a response for that.
I do have a question. Lawrence, I appreciate everything you're sharing. I'm a little curious about, were you raised as a Buddhist, or is it something that you found a little later in life? I'm curious about your origins of your connection to Buddhism.
That's an interesting question, in the sense that there's 2 answers that are contradictory. So my family, they were, I would say, devout Christians, evangelical kind of Christians. But I was a Buddhist before I knew it, because I didn't know what to call what I was thinking, and I didn't have a word for it. It's just that I just wasn't getting what, it wasn't that I thought they were wrong. I just couldn't understand what they were talking about. It was almost like they were talking a foreign language. And I remember that I got my first Buddhist lesson from a crawdad in front of my house when I was trying to catch crawdads. And the crawdad taught me a very important Buddhist principle of letting go and not being attached to things. Many years later, and I already had this sense of, like, people were talking about heaven and hell. And as a kid, I was saying, well, what's in this heaven thing? And they said, well, it's the land of milk and honey, and people sing and stuff. And I'm saying, that only sounds good because the alternative is hell. That doesn't sound like, that's not a place I would choose to go, So that was my idea as a kid. It's like, I don't get this. I don't get why you guys want to go to a place that forever and ever you're going to be singing and only eating milk and honey. That's all there is singing and eating milk and honey. I mean, yeah, for an hour or two, that could be fun, but forever? Come on, So, so as a kid, I just never could get that. And then when you ask questions about things like that, people got really upset. I remember getting the time that I remember turning off to the whole thing was when I asked a question in Sunday school and I got backhanded with the back of a brush in the face because I asked the question. And I really realized that there's no point in talking about this. This is not safe. Bringing up those questions is not a safe thing. And so I just had my own thoughts, kept my own thoughts. And then one day I was introduced to Buddhism and that's a whole long story that I won't waste everybody's time with, but I got introduced to Buddhism by some Japanese. Inadvertently by actually a Christian Japanese. But I got introduced to them, and the old people treated me immediately like I was just their grandkid. These are octogenarians. The old ladies, the old men, they just took to me and they treated me just like I had been there in that temple all the time. And I could finally talk to them about things that I thought, and their response was atarimae, which in Japanese is the equivalent of course, that's the way it is. Yeah, everybody knows that, So I just felt like, okay, then I guess I must be Buddhist then, and then so I started hanging out with them, and the more I hung out with them, the more things I learned, and I could expand my ideas about, how the world was put together and where I fit in that. I hope that somewhat answers the question. That's a truncated version.
That is an excellent response. Thank you. I really appreciate it. I wish growing up you could have had the pastor I had, because he encouraged questions, which really helped me in my faith development. So.
Okay.
Go ahead, Sheila. Yeah.
Is it true, Lawrence, that Buddhism is not really a religion, it's a practice? Because
Absolutely.
I ask also because now there are nuns who are Buddhists. We have United Methodists who are Buddhists. And so would you speak a little bit to that? Because I'm not totally clear, and maybe others are curious as well.
Yeah, sure. That is a very normal thing. And like when I go to Japan, and I spend a lot of time there when I can, it is not unusual for like a kid to have two weddings. And one of the weddings is a Buddhist wedding, and the other one is a Christian wedding. And I've been part of these wedding planning and stuff. And so one of the curious things is when I sit down with the girl who's planning her wedding, and I've known some of these girls. I've known them since they were like little babies, and I sit down with them, and they're going through the catalog of the Christian churches, and they're trying to choose which Christian church they're going to have the wedding at. And part of the reason is because that's like, you want to have a beautiful wedding that's ornate and all the time, and they choose it like on how the minister looks and what kind of food they have and stuff, but it has nothing to do with Christianity. And then the Buddhist one, it's a ceremony too, but Buddhism is all about the practice. One of the things that struck me about Buddhism when I started learning about it is the Buddha himself said, look, I'm going to show out some ideas, and these are the kind of things that work for me. You try them. If they don't work for you, don't do it, because it's not for you, but I'm going to tell you about this thing. But none of it makes any difference unless you do it. You got to try it. If you just think about it, if we have intellectual conversations about it, it's cocktail talk. Doesn't mean anything. That's why my approach to Buddhism, stirred by one of my mentors, is I don't think too much deeply about deep scriptures and a lot of the esoteric things about Buddhism. I try to focus on my practice. You know, it doesn't matter if I talk about kindness if I'm not kind. It doesn't matter if I talk about egalitarianism and being with people, and I can tell you all of. I'm a wordsmith. I can tell you all of that kind of stuff. Doesn't mean anything if I don't do it. If I don't practice it, you know. If somebody's hungry and I eat the whole sandwich and they're hungry, then whatever I can say about kindness doesn't exist. It's not a thing. So you can be that and you can still be a Christian. You can be that and you can be a Muslim. You can be that and you can be Jewish. You can be that and you can be Shinto, which many people are in Japan, you know? So it's Buddhism is a way of life. And if you, we don't proselytize. And one of the reasons we don't proselytize is we feel like everybody's a Buddhist already. They just don't know it. So what's the point of trying to tell them to be something that they already are? They just have not been enlightened to their Buddha nature.
Thank you. Unfortunately, or whatever the word would be, Christianity is also supposed to be a way of life.
Yeah, yeah.
Rather than tied up in a lot of what it has become over the years. That's my 2 cents worth.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that question, and I think it's important to think about too. And when we have our conversation about race and racism too, is being anti-racist. That's also something that's a practice. It's not something where especially for white folks, we don't get to say I'm not racist, like we saw with the attacks in Atlanta. Those are white supremacy kind of ideology attacks that happened, and just because the person is saying I'm not a racist does not mean that it's not racially motivated. We have to do that work. We have to have that practice in our daily lives to show up and be aware of those things. And I really appreciate being able to recognize that that practice is something that's bigger than us too. And I think that that's one of the things why we really have this focus on the South Dakotans Healing Racism and the conversation about religion and spirituality, because it is a practice and it really does change the way that you navigate your daily life. And so I really appreciate that perspective. I know, Lawrence, you have an 8 o'clock engagement, so we've got 5 more minutes with him. If anyone else has questions, or Lawrence, if you just want to close us out if nobody else does. And then you're more than welcome to stay. We do have chat afterwards too, so that's totally fine.
I will defer to questions.
So I've been having work phone calls kind of in and out of this and listening as I can. So I'm sorry if you've already covered this. But do you find it, I guess I'm not, okay, let's try to phrase these as questions. What is the Buddhist community like here in Sioux Falls? And do you find that with Buddhism, you find comfort in that community, or is it more so like an individualistic thing for you?
I think the largest Buddhist community in Sioux Falls is in prison. That's about, of the ones that I know. Now I do know that there is a temple. I think they're Hmong or Cambodian, and I've tried Vietnamese. So I've tried to go by there 2 or 3 times, and nobody's ever there. Every time I go by, I knock on the door, I leave a message or something like that, like a card under a window or something like that. But I haven't been able to contact them, but I'll keep trying. So I have no idea about their community. My Sangha is not in, we have Sanghas as monks. Okay, so they're like groups. So my Sangha is not really in, actually even in the United States, it's in Tsuruoka, So, and I'm what you could call a Ronin. And actually my name is Lorensu which means like masterless master kind of thing, right? That's what it translates to. So it means more or less that I'm a renegade, you know. It's like I just go about doing stuff, and then I check in with the bishop every once in a while, you know, to say, you know, you're still there, and, you know, or he'll call me and say, hey, how you doing? What are you doing? You know, so anyway, I don't know what other people are doing is probably the best answer.
There is, there are 2 monks that come from Minneapolis, and they come to the penitentiary. Because of COVID, they haven't been able to come, but when they are able to come back up, we do have a place at Spirit of Peace Church.
Okay.
So the monks come on Sunday evening, and so Sunday evening, my husband and I sponsor the group, the monks, to come, and they meditate and do a Dharma talk for anybody who's interested in learning about Buddhism. And then the next day, Monday, they spend all day at the penitentiary working with the guys. So once that gets started back up, I can let South Dakotans Healing for Racism, I can let them, let the group know, so that we can spread the word that the monks are back in town.
Thank you. That would be great.
You know, that could be a song. The monks are back in town. I can see that. That could be a hit. Bass and drums. You know,
With a doo-wah chorus.
a doo-wah. There you go. Need a doo-wops, but it could be a hit.
I love it. Thank you so much, Lawrence. I really want to be mindful of your time. We really appreciate you being here, and just everything is wonderful. We will post the conversation to YouTube too, so you'll be able to share it and have that conversation, you know, to review. And always, you know, feel free to send questions, and we can definitely revisit do it again. So thank you very much, Lawrence.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
See you later.
Peace.